The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show, and this being beautiful.
The radical, fundamental principles.
All right. Hopefully that solved it. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome on this, let's see, Saturday. Today is Saturday, yes. Let me know, is the volume okay? If the volume is too low or if it's fine, just let me know. It seems a little low from the meters that I have in front of me, but I need your fine ears to tell me if it's good or not. All right, it's fine. Death Eater 93 says, should I take anything seriously said by Death Eater? I don't know. What a name. All right, let's see. A few things. One, we should celebrate. Let's see. Is this actually working? I think I
By
am
Death
on
Eater?
Facebook again. I don't know.
What a name.
That's
let's see.
That's reason to celebrate.
A few things. One,
Facebook.
we should
We're
celebrate.
on Facebook.
I'm.
As you might know, I was
Is this actually working?
prevented from posting anything to Facebook
By Death Eater?
on my page.
Facebook
not
again. I don't
my
know.
personal
So,
name.
all right. Let's see.
That's reason to celebrate.
A few things.
No,
One,
Facebook.
we should celebrate.
I'm. As you might know, I was
sure that it was me.
prevented from posting anything to Facebook
By Death
on
Eater?
my page.
Facebook again. I don't
Not my
know.
personal
So,
name.
all right. Let's see.
That's reason. We'll get there. There we go. The echo should be gone. That it's not some Puerto Rican bot that is, I guess, trying to sway the election. So the nice thing is we are back on Facebook on the regular site. People can watch us there now live. The feedback should be gone. There's a loop. It should be gone. I shut it down. Now it's on a third level. There are 3 loops. How many loops are there? That's muted. That's muted. All right, as the echo's gone. Oh, good. Whew. You don't want to hear me 3 times? What's up with that? Should I be insulted? Should I take it personally? Anyway, Facebook, we're back. It's great. So I think I communicated with the Facebook customer service concierge. I sent them screenshots. And ultimately, the screenshots, it worked, and they got it all fixed up, and they got it all cleaned up, and here we are again. I never thought I'd be happy to be back on Facebook, but I am. I'm happy to be back on Facebook, and it's good to see. We've got people watching on Facebook. All those people have been, I'm sure, missing me. But don't forget that in order to support the show, in order to ask questions, and do so using Super Chat, you have to be on YouTube. So if you want to interact, if you want to be participate, if you want to ask questions, if you want to have comments that I can see and pay attention to, then you've got to be on Super Chat, and that requires you to come over to YouTube where the action really is. All right, now I thought today we would continue our discussion of the Great Reset, and really what I want to do is spend some quality time on the various issues that the Great Reset brings up. We talked about the Great Reset, I think, about a week ago, but it was quick. It was we primarily focused on Klaus Schwab's description of the Great Reset in a podcast. And what I want to do is break it up into what I think the 3 areas that they really focus on. The 3 areas being what they call stakeholder capitalism, inequality, and climate change. So today we're going to talk about stakeholder capitalism. We're going to talk about why it's an anti-concept, what the purpose of the anti-concept is. We're going to lump it together with conscious capitalism, because I've been wanting to talk about conscious capitalism for a long time. So we'll talk about conscious capitalism as well. and discuss those on Thursday, I think it is. We'll talk about inequality in the context of the Great Reset and what they would like to do in terms of inequality and why this is a big issue for them and why it's so important for them. And then on Sunday, I think it's Sunday, the 28th, I think that's a Sunday, maybe it's Saturday. It's Saturday, Saturday the 28th of November, we will talk about climate change. And to do the talk, to discuss climate change, I've invited Alex Epstein to join me. So Alex will be on the show, and it'll be at a slightly different time to accommodate his schedule. He likes to do stuff early in the morning. Not my thing, but his thing. So it'll be 8 a.m. Pacific time, so that'll be 11 a.m. Eastern time. That'll be on the 28th of November. So we've got 3 shows on the Great Reset. This is part of my, I guess, Biden derangement syndrome, my now obsession with leftist causes, and my focus on attacking them and taking them apart, and also educating you about the risks that are involved. So we're going to be focused on that in over the next week. So 3 shows on the Great Recess today: Stakeholder, Thursday, inequality. Saturday with Alex Epstein, we'll be talking about climate change. Now, on top of that, we're also continuing to talk about the objectivist virtues in the context of the application of objectivism to one's life and how to apply it to one's life. So we're going to be talking about the virtue of integrity. So we're going to be talking about integrity tomorrow. That'll be tomorrow. It looks like at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, tomorrow, and then we will do pride, which will be the final virtue. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm still trying to figure out when the best time to do pride is going to be. When we do pride, we're going to have a big match, $1,000 match to any Super Chat contributions, and another $1,000 to be contributed if we get 250 likes. So it would be great for the Pride episode, you invite all your friends, your relatives, your cousins. Cousins are relatives, I guess. Your neighbors, your acquaintances, everybody, to participate and to like the show so we can get 250 likes. And, of course, if we can pick up $1,000 in the Super Chat, that would be great. All right, so we'll jump in. We'll jump in today with our topic on so-called stakeholder capitalism. I put it in quotes because there is no such thing as stakeholder capitalism. It is an anti-concept, and we'll get to that. And but I just want to remind you before you leave today to like the show. If you're on YouTube, you can also like it on Facebook. Any kind of interaction, comments, liking, of course, sharing is the most important one. On Facebook, you can share to groups and you can share to other people. Brings a lot of people and a lot of attention to us. You can do the same thing on all the other platforms. Just share. But if you interact with the show, that raises its importance in the algorithm. It raises the probability that they will actually see it and promote it to the vast number of people out there. It's an easy way for you to help promote the Iran Book Show and to help promote objectivism and to get the word out there into the culture and ultimately to help change the culture is to share, is just to like and do things like that. So please, if you care, if you value this, if you value what we're doing, please do that on whatever platform you happen to be watching today. Although YouTube, of all of them, is probably the most valuable. Facebook, number 2. Facebook, we have a lot of, Facebook just has a lot of people. You can get to a lot of people through Facebook, which is great. Okay. Of course, you can use the Super Chat feature to ask questions today. I already have 2 of them. The higher the dollar amount, the more likely it is that I answer early. Otherwise, I'm going to leave questions to the end of the show, and I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. Also, my website last time had crashed, was down. It's back up. So I remember there was somebody who wanted to become a $250 a month supporter of the show. Unfortunately, I can't remember who it was. But I told them not to do it because the website was down. Well, the website's up now, so you can go ahead and engage. You can go to yaronbookshow.com/support. You can become a supporter of the show from anywhere from $2 to $500 on a monthly basis on their page. We now have quite a few people now at 500, 250, and 100. And of course, several hundred people if you add in all the different levels of support. You can also do that Patreon and Subscribe Star. All right, let's jump right in to so-called stakeholder capitalism. What is stakeholder capitalism? Really, I think to understand stakeholder capitalism, one first has to understand what it is that stakeholder capitalism, in their mind, in the mind of those who advocate for it, is positioning itself against. What is the counter to this idea of stakeholder capitalism? And the counter is the idea of capitalism. Capitalism being a system of property rights. Capitalism being a system of limited government, of government being there to protect individual rights. Capitalism being the system in which the government is not involved in the economy and that companies are left alone. And capitalism being a system in which companies companies that are founded, that are started, entrepreneurs that start companies, choose what their primary focus is going to be. So in a free market, even in the American market today, this is still an element in which is relatively free. A company, when it is established, gets to decide, what does it want to focus on? What does it want to do? For example, you can start in a free economy, you can start a nonprofit. You can start a company that does not place monetary profit at the forefront and has some other purpose. The Einmann Institute is a non-for-profit. It's not about making money off of its activities because we believe that the kind of range, the scope, the long-term nature of those activities are not easily monetized in a way that fits a kind of a for-profit model. So it is organized as a non-for-profit. Now, it's not really non-for-profit. It's not for-profit monetary-wise. We believe that we are a for-profit organization, just the profits are philosophical, cultural, spiritual, that we are engaged in, right? This still is a function, but that function is not maximizing profitability, revenue minus expenses. You can also organize a corporation today. I can't remember, it's not a C corp, it's some kind of other type of corporation, where you explicitly note in your incorporation document that the purpose of the corporation is something, to be, you're going to make money, but, and investors will receive a return on their money, but the primary purpose of the business is not the owners, not the investors, not the capitalists, if you will. The primary purpose of the business is, I don't know, to save cuddly animals or to promote some so-called social purpose. But of course, the most common business, the most common form of corporation that exists in the world today, in a free country, is a corporation, a C corporation, S corporation, a limited liability partnership, and all those entities are structured with a particular legal commitment. The legal commitment of all these entities is to maximize the financial well-being of its owners, to maximize long-term value for the owners of the business. And in what's called a public corporation, and note, even though it's called public corporation, it's still private. It's just that the private ownership of the corporation is diffused. Many, many people own the corporation, and their ownership stake can be traded in markets. That's what makes it a public corporation. A public corporation is a corporation where the ownership stake of its owners, the shares, can be diffused can be traded in public markets. Right? In public markets. Now, it's still true, though, that a public corporation has legally, in the way it's structured, a fiduciary duty to maximize the well-being, the wealth, not the well-being, the financial well-being of, in its capacity, to the extent that it can, of its shareholders, of its owners. In other words, its responsibility is legally, from a legal fiduciary perspective, is to maximize shareholder wealth. That's what people who buy into these corporations assume when they buy into them. And this is considered today in the world of the Davos, in the world of elites, in the world of the World Economic Forum. This has become the defining characteristic for them of capitalism. Capitalism is that system in which corporations are run in order to maximize the wealth of shareholders. It's called shareholder capitalism. They're not philosophical or thoughtful or interested in the history enough to understand or to think or to read about capitalism and recognize that capitalism is actually a system of property rights, that corporations are just an innovation to come out of that system, that capitalism is not defined by the corporate entity. Capitalism is defined by property rights and the limited role of government where it only protects individual rights, where it protects those property rights. That is not something that they identify, that they, in a sense, can identify. It's in many respects beyond their comprehension because they're not philosophical, and of course they're not interested. But what is interesting is they identify a certain truth by linking capitalism to shareholders and to corporations run for the sake of shareholders. What they identify about capitalism when they do this is capitalism's essential self-interested nature. That capitalism is about wealth creation. And it's about wealth creation for particular people, for the owners. Now, everybody, the wealth that's created through capitalism is wealth that everybody benefits from. But essentially, the motivation is a selfish motivation. I'm running this company to maximize my and other owners' wealth. And capitalism, of course, is essentially a system of people pursuing their self-interest, of the pursuit of self-interest. It is a system, a political, social, economic system that leaves individuals free to pursue their own self-interest, to pursue their own happiness, to pursue their own lives. It is not an accident that America is identified with capitalism, not only because of industries and corporations and innovation and entrepreneurs, but primarily because of the fact that its founding documents protect our liberty, our freedom to live. The corporations, the economic activity is a consequence of that fundamental idea. It's a consequence of the idea of limited government and individual rights. It's a consequence of the idea of the protection of property rights and the need to protect property rights. It's a consequence of those ideas. That is not what defines capitalism. What defines capitalism is individual rights. What defines capitalism is freedom. And when people are free, they form corporations, they form a variety of different relationships voluntarily that facilitate the creation of massive amount of wealth. And by the way, nobody, including Karl Marx and including Klaus Schwab, from whom I'll read in a minute, deny the fact that the capitalism, what they see as capitalism that we've had over the last 200 years, and for some of that we've had at least come close to capitalism, has indeed produced unbelievable amounts of wealth. So they correctly identify it as one of the principles behind it. They don't identify it explicitly, but implicitly they identify it as this idea of two things. One is property rights. That's what shareholders are, owners of property. And individualism or self-interest, which is what maximizing shareholders' wealth is about. And look, they find that offensive, as almost everybody does. The idea that we have a whole economic system dedicated to people pursuing their own values, even if those values are not likable, even if those values don't promote what some philosopher kings might consider the common good or the public interest. That's fundamentally what they don't like about the system. It leaves individuals to make choices for themselves, to pursue their own values, to pursue their own goals. It makes it possible for individuals to cooperate together, to pursue joint ventures that don't promote the philosopher king's view of what the common good is, or what the public interest is. But what is the common good? Who is the common? And can they have a good? See, the problem is that the world is dominated by altruism and collectivism that reject the idea that individuals have the ability or the right to make choices for themselves, to make decisions for themselves, or that morally it is legitimate for them to pursue their own happiness. Or if it is legitimate for them to pursue their happiness, it's only legitimate for them to pursue their own happiness in the context of some common good and social well-being, which, as Ayn Rand pointed out, don't exist, but who the philosophy kings have anointed themselves to define for us. So your right to pursue your own happiness is only okay in the context of what they have decided is the appropriate, proper goal for you to pursue, for society to pursue, for society. So you can pursue your happiness only if it fits into their conception of what's right and what's good and what's noble and what's just. So what they've come up with is, and look, the people who advocate for stakeholder capitalism and the people who advocate for conscious capitalism is another form of stakeholder capitalism. It's capitalism where, again, focused on the corporation, because that's what they associate with capitalism. They don't associate with capitalism freedom. They associate with capitalism the corporate entity. The idea of conscious capitalism is that the corporation should take care of its employees and should be nice, should be conscious of the needs of everybody, not just its shareholders. So it's very similar to stakeholder capitalism. It's just a nice marketing attempt to do something a little different. So the idea of stakeholder capitalism and the idea of conscious capitalism, again in quotes, is to promote anti-capitalism. And this is why it's an anti-concept. An anti-concept is a concept that is used in order to destroy, in order to eviscerate the original concept, which is capitalism. The whole idea of stakeholder capitalism is to eviscerate that freedom, to eviscerate the focus on individual rights, to eviscerate the focus on property rights in the name of common good, social well-being, and so on. The whole point of it is to undermine, undercut the concept of capitalism, to destroy it. So that ultimately, capitalism comes to mean nothing, or comes to mean what they want it to mean, which is basically objectively what they are advocating for, is a form of fascism. Stakeholder capitalism, conscious capitalism, imposed by the state, which is ultimately what they want, is a form, as we'll see, of fascism. Right? Anti-concepts and package deals are related. They're two ways in which concepts are abused. A package deal is when you have a concept that has within it contradictory things that don't belong together. Right? An anti-concept, and most package deals are anti-concept. All package deals, I think, anti-concept. I think anti-concepts are broader than package deals, but again, I'm not an expert in this. But an anti-concept is a concept who's taking something legitimate, and because of the content it brings into it, is purposefully there to delegitimize the concept, to undermine it, to destroy it. It's a concept that means nothing. Stakeholder capitalism means nothing. Because what they claim it means is that corporations should stop working to maximize shareholder wealth. They should start working for their owners. They should negate and ignore property rights. They should negate and ignore contracts. They should negate and ignore their fiduciary duty. And instead, they should focus on what? Well, on the common good, on the public interest. And who is the common? And they don't want to put it in terms of common good, public interest, because those are too vague for them, right? They don't want to say it's the state, because they're not socialists. They don't believe in the state owning the means of production. So instead of the common good and the public interest, they use the term stakeholder. Now, who is the stakeholder? Anybody who has some relationship with the business. So stakeholders are customers, the employees, the suppliers, the shareholders, the bondholders, the financial interested parties as well. But they're also the community. They're also nature. They're anything, people that interact. They're also government. All of those are stakeholders. They have a stake in how this business does. I mean, to the extent that you can imagine nature having a stake in something. Of course, again, that's a contradiction. It cannot happen. It cannot be. But again, this is the kind of conceptual confusion they want you to have. So to them, what it's about is that corporations should now take into account the impact of every decision they have on all of these stakeholders and stop being so selfish. Stop being so self-interested. Stop being so focused on property rights as to only focus on the owners, the people who actually have a contractual relationship, the people who actually have a stake, the people to which you have a fiduciary duty. What the Great Reset is trying to do is the Great Reset is the idea that COVID has created this great opportunity for the forces of stakeholder capitalism to reinvent the world, to reset the world, to change our fundamental ways in which we do things, to change our values. And they've noticed, these people have noticed, that the governments have done amazing, horrific things, like massive shutdowns of whole countries and cities. And they've noticed that they get away with it. Nobody seems to care. Nobody's standing up against them. They've also noticed that governments have invested huge amounts of money into things like vaccines, vaccine development. And indeed, the vaccine development, to a large extent, is being attributed to governments investing in this. And you think, whoa, look what government can do. Government has immense power. And people are not resisting. People are letting government steamroll them. People are accepting the idea that government is needed in order to create vaccines, that markets cannot take it. This is an opportunity for us to reshape the world. People are sending us all these signals that they are ready for radical change. And that's the Great Reset. The Great Reset is to reset our values, reset our political system, reset our focus, reset where the world is heading. And what they tell us is that capitalism has failed. It failed in the financial crisis. I've done an 8-hour course on explaining why that is not true, but they say it failed during the financial crisis. Now it's failed in COVID. It failed to provide enough hospital spaces. Why is capitalism to blame? There's no capitalism in hospitals, really. It failed to provide a vaccine, but wait, it's exactly capitalism that is providing the vaccine. The little bit of capitalism we have left in the world. It's failed and has to fail, they tell us, to provide for the people who've lost their jobs. Well, people lost their jobs because the government forced businesses to close, not choices. Now, some people would have lost their jobs anyway, and markets can deal with people losing their jobs by creating other jobs, by providing unemployment insurance, by charity. But no, you need massive government stimulus to get us out of this economy, which proves again that capitalism has failed, that what they call shareholder capitalism has failed. So this is an opportunity, the people at Davos tell us, the people at the World Economic Forum tell us. This is an opportunity to rethink capitalism. This is an opportunity to reset our world. This is an opportunity to rethink our values. As Klaus Schwab, as you know, I like quoting Klaus Schwab. I can't do the German accent, though, so I apologize. He does have this thick, perfect German accent for this kind of rhetoric. As he writes, what kind of capitalism do we want? As if there are various types of capitalism. Note that by doing this, they undermine the whole concept of capitalism by telling us all kinds of capitalism. And this is, Ray Dalio does this, and many of the so-called promoters of capitalism do it. And people who talk about crony capitalism do it. There is no crony capitalism. There's cronyism. There is no state capitalism. There's statism. Capitalism is a particular thing. It's that system in which we are left free, in which the government only protects our rights. It is that system where all property is owned by the individuals. But they want to destroy the concept. And they do this with all kinds of capitalism. So here are all kinds of capitalism that Klaus Schwab has. He says, this may be the defining question of our era, what kind of capitalism we want. If we want to sustain our economic system for future generations, we must answer it correctly. So he says, if we want to avoid socialism, because he's anti-socialism, right? We need another form of capitalism. Our form of capitalism, clearly COVID and the financial crisis has shown has failed. So what kind of capitalism do we want? Somebody says on the chat, David Pacman says he's a capitalist. That's right. Elizabeth Warren, if you remember when she ran for president, said she was pro-capitalism. They all say they're pro-capitalism. Again, eviscerating the word by doing so, the concept by doing so. So he says, if you want to sustain our economic system for future generations, we must answer it correctly. Generally speaking, he says, we have 3 models to choose from, 3 types of capitalism. The first is shareholder capitalism, embraced by most Western corporations, which holds that a corporation's primary goal should be to maximize its profits. You know, long-term profits as manifest in shareholder wealth, but okay. The second model, he says, is state capitalism, which is really, you know, explicit fascism, right? That's me saying that. He says, which entrusts the government with setting the direction of the economy and has arisen to prominence in many emerging markets, not least China. So this is the Singapore and China model, or at least that's the perception of that model. You know, there's a whole question of whether there is such a thing as what is the China model and what is the Singapore model. But that is the perception, state capitalism. Talk about a contradiction in terms, right? But compared to these two options, he writes, the third has the most to recommend it. Stakeholder capitalism, a model I first proposed a half-century ago. I did not know that Klaus Schwab was the guy responsible for stakeholder capitalism. If I'd known, I would have hated him a long time ago. My hatred towards him is relatively new. He says, this model positions private corporations as trustees of society and is clearly the best response to today's social and environmental challenges. So stakeholder capitalism is a model that positions private corporations as trustees of society. Now, how is this private? How do private corporations be trustees of society? Who decides what society wants? Who decides what's good for society? Who decides what society's values should be? Isn't this just another form of what he calls state capitalism, in which some entity, call it the state, decides what society needs, what society desires, what society wants, lets the corporations know, and then they execute on that? How do you manifest this idea of corporations as trustees of society? Now note, what really offends them about shareholder capitalism is its roots in egoism. And what they like about stakeholder capitalism is its implicit altruism. Its implicit, almost egalitarianism. All stakeholders are equal. He writes, shareholder capitalism, currently the dominant model, first gained ground in the United States of America in the 1970s. That's false because it first gained ground in the 19th century with the establishment of the first stock markets, right? And expanded its influence globally in the following decades. Its rise was not without merit. They always do this. They throw you little crumbs. During its heyday, hundreds of millions of people around the world prospered, true, as profit-seeking companies unlocked new markets and created new jobs, true. But that wasn't the whole story. Advocates of shareholder capitalism, including Milton Friedman and the Chicago School, had neglected the fact that a publicly listed corporation is not just a profit-seeking entity, but also a social organism. Organism? So it's a part of a social body. And note, if it's part of a social body, then somebody has to command it and control it. Together with financial industry, he writes, pressure to boost short-term results, the single-minded focus on profits caused shareholder capitalism to become increasingly disconnected from the real economy. Where is that evident? Where is this disconnect between corporations, capitalism, and the real economy actually happening? Now, people say, look, during COVID, share prices of technology companies went through the roof, and the real economy is suffering. But why did they go through the roof? Why did Amazon and Zoom and Apple and Google go through the roof? Because during COVID, what we discovered is the real economy is on our computers. The real economy is a click mouse away. The real economy is right here in front of us. It is technology. All those companies did well because we used their products to survive during COVID. There is no disconnect between companies and the real economy, between stock prices and the real economy. They contrast the real economy not with fake economy. They contrast, which they should, right? They contrast the real economy with the so-called, what they consider the fake economy, which is financial dealings. Finance is the fake economy. People making money off of finance is the fake economy for them. So many realize, he says, this form of capitalism is no longer sustainable. Who realizes? No, there's no proof, no evidence, no indication what he's advocating for, why he's advocating for it. Just this statement. Clearly, shareholder capitalism is inadequate. On what basis? For what? Where is this disconnect? Isn't it true that in this amazing shareholder economy, we have Zoom so that we can communicate across continents during this time and be with our families in spite of not being able to be maybe physically present? Isn't it amazing that we have Amazon that can deliver products to our door, and Google that we can search and find stuff, and Apple that we can be entertained on our iPhones, no stop, in spite of being locked away by the government in our homes? Where's this disconnect? No proof, no evidence, no suggestion, nothing, zero, zilch. He says the current economic system represents a betrayal of future generations. And he says, due to its environmental unsustainability. But to the extent that the current economic system represents a betrayal of future generations, it is because government is taking on huge amounts of debt it can never pay back. Government is regulating businesses in a way that is restraining productivity, restraining innovation, restraining economic growth, which future generations are going to suffer because we didn't go fast enough. We didn't make enough money. We didn't create enough wealth. So they will suffer. We suffer, by the way, as well. Where is this? But it's not capitalism that's doing that. For what I see, the unsustainability of debt, for example, is at the governmental level, not at the level of the corporation or even the individual. He says millennials and Generation Zs no longer want to work for, invest in, or buy companies that lack value beyond maximizing shareholder value. How do we know that? Where's the evidence of that? As far as I know, millennials and Generation Z are using their Robinhood app to buy stocks of companies and to try to maximize their own wealth by engaging in capitalist activity like trading in the stock market. Thank you, Christian. Incredibly generous on top of your regular generosity. Thank you. And then he says, and finally, listen to this. Executives and investors have started to recognize, this is new, started to recognize that their own long-term success is closely linked to their customers, employees, and suppliers. They just discovered this because Klaus Schwab has taught them this. They didn't know. I mean, Ford didn't know that his customers were important. Neither did Steve Jobs, probably, it turns out. And they didn't know their employees were significant. That's why Ford, whipped them 3 times a day. And suppliers. No successful business in America has ever understood how important suppliers are to them. It's complete insanity. It is complete insanity. The idea that only now executives and investors know that customers, employees, and suppliers are important, as if this is some new revelation. Of course, they've always known this. And acted accordingly. If they didn't know this, they would have never been successful. Imagine a business that thinks, oh, customers don't matter. Customers don't, hell with customers. Not in a free market that can't exist. Not under what is considered capitalism that cannot exist. I mean, where did these people get off with these notions that they've somehow discovered the wheel. By the way, if you're on one of the other platforms and you'd like to ask me a question, the way to do that is to come over to YouTube and to use the Super Chat feature on YouTube. Now, it is true, as he writes, that stakeholder capitalism is quickly gaining ground. Even the U.S. Business Roundtable, bunch of investment firms, banks, and other institutions around the United States have all committed themselves to this idea of stakeholder capitalism, this idea that they care, for the first time ever, about not just shareholders, but also society at large and customers and suppliers and customers. What a radical view that they suddenly care about customers. See, he says we should seize this moment to ensure that stakeholder capitalism remains the dominant model, the new dominant model. To that end, the World Economic Forum, which he leads, is releasing a new Davos manifesto, which states that, now here's the new Davos manifesto. This is the new reset. This is what they want stakeholder capitalism to look like. Companies should pay their fair share of taxes. Again, this is new. Statists have been arguing this forever. I mean, Donald Trump would agree with that one. He was lambasting companies from switching, their incorporation to Ireland in order to reduce taxes. Now, what is this code for? Companies should pay their fair share of taxes. That's code word for we should have international taxes. We should have an international system where you can't go to Ireland, to shield yourself from taxation. You can't go to Luxembourg and incorporate there and pay lower taxes. You can't, Iran, go to Puerto Rico and get significant lower taxes. We need a global system of taxation. We'll talk about this more on the episode on inequality. A global system of taxation so that corporations cannot evade the taxes because they owe taxes. Now note how he talked about customers, employees and suppliers and shareholders, these are all stakeholders. But the first thing of the Davos manifesto that's important to him is how much taxes are paid. Because at the end of the day, as you'll see, this is a completely statist idea. I mean, if stakeholders was left alone for the marketplace, if there was no backing by government, if there was no coercion and force involved, what would happen to stakeholders? It would die. Because the corporations that ran by stakeholder theory couldn't compete with shareholders. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So companies should pay their fair share of taxes. They should show zero tolerance for corruption. Uphold human rights throughout their global supply chains. What is human rights? I mean, I wish what they mean by human rights would be what we mean by human rights. Individual rights. The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. That's not what they mean. They mean so-called, quote, rights to health care, quote, rights to a living wage, rights, quote, to a decent workplace. So when he writes that uphold human rights throughout the global supply chain, what he means, no sweatshops, no people working at below what we in the West consider the minimum wage. No, we need everybody to be earning the same as we do in the United States. And, he says, advocate for competitive level field. What does competitive level field mean? Competitive level playing field. What does that mean? That means antitrust. We need to break up those monopolies. And we need to subsidize people who are not doing well. We need to subsidize people to raise them up, including companies that are failing. If they fit into the mold of the common good, we need to take the money from the successful and give it to them. And he says, but to uphold the principles of stakeholder capitalism, companies will need new metrics. for example, they can't use shareholder value. They can't use the stock market. They can't use dollars. They can't use profits. Because those are metrics that only apply to the owners, the capitalists, the people who provide the funding. But now we have other stakeholders. So we need to satisfy them. So we need metrics by which to measure whether we're living up to our goals. So he says we need a new measure of shared value creation. Notice the collectivism. Notice the altruism. Notice the rejection of individuals. Shared value creation. How do you measure that? Shared by whom? Who gets to decide what is shared and what is not? Who gets to decide what is the common, what is the public good, and what is not? He said the shared value creation should include things like environmental, social, and governance. This is the ESG movement. In addition to financial metrics. So we should evaluate a corporation on how it's done on environmental guidelines, on how it's doing in terms of impacting society, however you measure that, and on its governance. And its governance here doesn't mean its governance as I always saw it. How do we make sure the boards of directors and CEOs maximize shareholder wealth? That's good governance. I used to do research on governance in that context. No, here it means how do we make sure that they pursue the common good, that they share the wealth, that they pay their taxes, that they don't commit fraud, that they don't supposedly take advantage of employees in third world countries or whatever. And there are initiatives. And notice the betrayal here. There are initiatives to develop accounting frameworks to establish your stakeholder worthiness, your social values creation, how well you're creating social values. And who is developing these metrics? It's the big four accounting firms. Talk about the sanction of the victim. It's the big accounting firms that are developing the anti-financial metrics to evaluate companies' environmental, social, and governance qualifications. So the first initiative is to come up with new metrics. The second one, he says, is to adjust executive pay. He says since the 1970s, executive pay has skyrocketed, mostly to align management decision-making with shareholder interest. Absolutely. The problem before the 1970s were managers were making a lot of money and shareholders were not. The owners were not. So we developed things like stock options in order to align the interests of shareholders with managers. A massive positive innovation. But he says this is bad. He says in the new stakeholder paradigm, salary should instead align with the new measures of long-term shared value creation. Shared value creation. Shared value creation. Who gets to decide on what's the shared value creation? And he said, finally, the final thing that needs to be done, the next metric we need to have, is that large corporations should understand that they themselves are major stakeholders in the common future. Clearly, all companies should still seek to harness their core competencies and maintain an entrepreneurial mindset. How do you do that when you don't care about finance, when you don't care about making a profit, when you don't facilitate and you're measuring people on non-entrepreneurial standards? But they should maintain their entrepreneurial mindset. But they should also work with other stakeholders to improve the state of the world in which we are operating in. In fact, this latter proviso should be their ultimate purpose, to improve the world. As if they don't, by making money, right? The implicit is that. Now, what does this all boil down to? What does this actually all mean? Well, all this is just a cushy, nice, friendly, soft, cuddly way of promoting fascism. Of promoting a system in which we have big corporations who maybe meet regularly, maybe in the business roundtable, with other stakeholders, primarily the governments and maybe the intellectuals, the various types of philosopher kings, and decide what our shared values should be. And then those shared values are then they are told, the corporations who are in this clique and the corporations outside of it are told what the shared values are. Let's say climate change is a shared value, and now everybody is measured by their ability to pursue climate change. And salary is determined that, but it has to come from the top down. It has to come from everybody meeting around a table and discussing this and figuring out what the shared values is. And of course, what if there's disagreement? Who has the ultimate say? Well, I'm sure Schwab would say, well, society. But how does society manifest that? Well, through voting. But voting is kind of, it's cumbersome, as we can see right now with the whole charade of the 2020 election. It's cumbersome. It's open to interpretation. Well, who should decide ultimately? Well, it has to be the people who understand what the common good is. It has to be the people who somehow commune with the world of spirits and know what's good for society. It has to be, at the end, this is a straight Plato philosopher king fascism, where the people who know, the people who commune with the spirit of the shared common values, with the public, with society, know. And then their job is to tell the corporations what they can and cannot do. It's not about stakeholders. Customers are not demanding that they be better taken care of because shareholder capitalism is not providing them what they want. Quite the contrary. Customers seem to be quite happy. I know of no suppliers complaining. There might be suppliers complaining about a particular company, but they're not complaining about the system of capitalism because people don't pay them on time and don't take their issues. The whole point of the beauty of capitalism is that customers and suppliers and shareholders and employees, the interests ultimately all align. They're all aligned around profits. Suppliers are not going to be happy when businesses start not having profits and therefore not being able to pay the bills. Employees, if they're smart and if they're knowledgeable, if they understand the world, are not going to be happy when businesses start failing because they can't pay them, because they're focused on some other shared social value. And customers are not going to be happy when there's no iPhone 13, because it's deemed that an iPhone 13 is not a shared common value, and that Apple should be doing, carbon reset 23, whatever. The point is the insanity of thinking that anybody is better off and presenting this as some version of capitalism. And why do they do it? Why do they use the word capitalism? Because in spite of everything, in spite of everybody complaining about it, in spite of everybody putting it down, in spite of all the things that people accuse capitalism of, everybody knows, everybody. They might want to evade it sometimes, but everybody basically knows that the wealth we have around here, that the wealth we all have, that the prosperity we all enjoy is a product of those self-interested shareholder wealth maximizing businesses. It's all a product of whatever capitalism we have. Everybody knows that. Even when it comes to China, and people look at China and say, well, how did they become relatively wealthy as compared to the poverty they used to have? They have to say it's capitalism. They might call it state capitalism and misidentify how it actually happened, but they have to use the term capitalism because everybody knows that is the system of wealth creation. What they want is the effect without the cause. This is, I think, an important philosophical point, which I'm taking from Ayn Rand and Leonard Peacock. What they want is the effect without the cause. What they want is the prosperity. What they want is people's enthusiasm about the iPhone 13 and about technology more broadly. What they want is the rising standard of living and the higher quality of life. What they want is at least the pretense of all of that. These people. What they don't want is freedom. What they don't want is rights, individual rights. What they don't want is individualism. What they don't want is people making their own choices. Now, they know that they can't get the effect without the cause. And in that sense, they don't really want the effect. They want you to think they want the effect. What they want is control. What they want is to rule. What they want is to be able to tell you how to live. What they want is total domination over your life. They don't even know that that's what they want because many of them can't even admit it to themselves. But that is what they want. They want to control you. They want to dominate you. They want to tell you what you should value. Shared common values. They don't want you making decisions for yourselves. Partially because they don't believe you can. It goes back to Plato's idea that you just live in a cave. You're just morons in a cave who only see shadows, never see the truth, never see reality, don't know what's good for you. But these people want control. And they know that socialism doesn't work. That they know. And they know that you know that socialism doesn't work. Yeah, there's some young people out there pretending to be socialists. There's AOC and these other people who are openly socialist and they think they can convince you that socialism won't work. But they know that the vast majority of people on planet Earth have seen what socialism does and aspire to the kind of wealth and success that America has. So they steal our concept, capitalism. They pretend they want you to flourish and be successful. And they portray it as some new way of doing it, stakeholder capitalism, conscious capitalism. And they place themselves as the arbiters of what the shared values should be that this new so-called form of capitalism should pursue. But all it is fascism. What is fascism? Fascism is the control over the means of production by the state, by the rulers, by those in power. They control the means of production. They determine the shared values. The shared values that are supposed to dictate how corporations, and therefore how individuals, how businesses function. This is fascism. Now, fascism has failed, and they would never call this fascism. But people still believe, that Mussolini made the trains run on time, and that Hitler revitalized a German economy that was on the brink of collapse, or had maybe already collapsed. They still believe that fascism actually had positive economic outcomes. And again, they might not even think of themselves as fascists, but that's what they want. They want society to dictate values to all of us through a mechanism of large corporations that then function to make those values real. Guided by whom? Well, by the government, by the state, by the authoritarian in charge. It's so, I mean, this is why the German accent of Schwab is so appropriate, because it's so German. It's so top down. It's so collectivist. It's the negation of the individual, the negation of the individual's mind, and the elevation of the collective, the masses, the public as the standard of the good. To be ruled by somebody who gets to tune into the public and figure out what that good is. And they can't declare it as fascism because they know that's unpopular. They can't declare it as authoritarianism because they know that's unpopular. So they call it capitalism. Because they're linking into the one good thing about capitalism that everybody recognizes: it produces the goods. And this is where the world is heading. I've said often, I don't think we're heading towards socialism. I think we're heading towards fascism. And then, by the way, the socialists will embrace fascism because there's no difference. Just like the socialists in Germany embraced Hitler. In one way or another, ominous parallels that Leonard Peikoff wrote in 1980s will come true. It's coming true. I mean, we can still fight it and hopefully prevent it. But that's the way not just America, but the world is heading. That's what this reset is all about. Never let a crisis go to waste. And in this case, the solution to that crisis is, for now, a soft version of fascism to be followed by a hard version of fascism. And as I've said before, this is left and right. There is nobody defending capitalism, freedom, free trade. Nobody defending those things. I mean, the strongest defenders of free trade right now, funnily enough, are the Chinese, right? The Chinese have just signed this huge free trade agreement in Southeast Asia with all these countries to establish a free trade zone in Southeast Asia and lower tariffs, low restraints on, all in the name now of state capitalism. So what they want is the destruction of freedom. What they want you to believe is that they want prosperity. And what they and they do that by using the word capitalism. But this is the reset. The reset is the destruction of whatever economic freedom we still have. Whatever economic freedom we still have is gone, right? Is gone. Wanda Freeman says, I'm making him unhappy. Why am I making him unhappy? I'm just revealing the evil that exists out there in the world. But you need to know it, because how can you fight it if you don't know it? And this is where we're heading, and this is why, you know, in many respects, these people are more dangerous than the socialists, because they have this. They wear suits and ties, they look like responsible people, and they get the business roundtable engaged with them, they get the big accounting firms engaged with them, they get Wall Street supporting them, they get business, which is going to have a big role in this new fascist world. Engage with them. They have power, they have money, they have resources. The socialists are a bunch of hippies running around, AOC running around, imagining all kind of things. And they're all going to merge, right? Because they all merge around climate change. All right, so that is stakeholder capitalism. That is the enemy. That is what we need to decimate and destroy. That is what they're after. That's what they're trying to do. It's worse than cronyism. It's fascism. It's much more dictates from above. It's much more the government telling you what you can and cannot produce, where you can produce, who you can sell it to, what prices, how much you pay your employees. Unions are then controlled by the government or disbanded completely because the workers don't matter. They have to serve the common good as well. They also must be part of the shared common values. societal values. Everything is then dictated from a few businesses, few corporations, and you think they'll break up the monopolies? No, they want bigger monopolies. Because the fewer companies are out there, the easier it is to control. The more companies, the less possible it is to control them. And now, Frank says stakeholder government. And yeah, they view democracy as the manifestation of stakeholder government. The stakeholders are voting, but they're never going to give the voters any power. The voters are just which group of thugs or which group of philosopher kings are going to rule over us. And ultimately, the voters will be superfluous and they'll be eliminated. We won't need them because the philosopher kings know better. So that's a great reset. You can look it up online. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of, all the big corporate heads are participating in this. I mean, I think the way corporations view it is they want to go there to try to make it more sane. So they'll compromise a little bit. They'll shift a little bit. But they'll give it credence. They'll legitimize it. In other words, they'll sanction it. And by sanctioning it, they'll help make it real and give it their seal of approval. So you'll see a lot of businessmen who I respect go to Davos because it's the place to be. It's everybody who's cool, everybody who's wealthy, everybody who's influential is in Davos. So it's a sad state of affairs. And I don't know how you get around this. They have the money, they have the resources, they have the world, they have altruism on their side, they have collectivism on their side, and they are popular, and they are influential, and they have power. And all we have are better ideas. And the importance is to stand up against these. But again, the way to stand up against them is not politically. Because there's nobody in the political map today who's anti these ideas. Again, Tucker Carlson is not against stakeholders. He's for stakeholders. If you've watched his show, you know he doesn't like shareholder capitalism, if you want to call it that, shareholder wealth maximization. It destroys little town America. It destroys little businesses. It's selfish. It's greedy. It doesn't think about the common good and social well-being. So there's nobody fighting on the political realm. So the way to fight this is not in elections. It's not about whether Biden or Trump wins. Trump is part of this problem. Trump is no different. Trump wanted to manage the economy from the top. Trump wanted to have corporations run to make America great again, not to make shareholders money. Trump just reinforces these trends. So it's not about, it's not about left or right in the world in which we live. Left and right are both statists now. There is the political map in the United States and in much of the world is basically pick your statists. So get over Trump. Get over politics. There is a real fight to be had over ideas, over philosophy, over what is going to shape the future. We've got to fight for individualism. We've got to fight for property rights. We've got to fight for individual rights. And ultimately for egoism. And short of that fight, there is nothing else. Everything else is, in my view, elections are just calculations and who buys us more time. It's not about voting for anybody good. It's about, and then we can have strategic disagreements about whether Trump buys us more time or Biden buys us more time. But it's just about buying time. It's not about changing anything. Because the people who are in politics today don't want to make changes that we would support, that we would want. So we got to get back to education, to ideas, to philosophy, to what actually matters. Right? And to what actually will change the world, will have an impact on the world. Ideas, 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 ideas. That is what it's about. Okay, I think I might have missed some of the $20 questions. I apologize. I didn't mark the ones that were 20. I've just got two that I marked 20, and then I'll do those first, and then I'll go back to, I'll just do them by order. So the first one is, oops, wait a second. That's, okay. The first one is Jennifer, and then let me just do this. Why do so many people want to control others so badly? Just fear of reality. I think so. I think it's, I mean, no, it's not just fear of reality. They've been taught a bad philosophy. They've really been taught bad ideas. And many of them do it fooling themselves that they are being benevolent. So a lot of these people have been taught that they are truly all philosopher kings. They see it that way. Now, agree that they have to evade a lot in order to do it. And why do they evade? That is not, I don't have an answer to why do they evade. There is no answer to why they evade. They do. And once they evade, and once they have this platonic notion of they are God's gift to the world, and that other people don't have that ability, and they look around the world and they, you know, they want to dictate what values are good for you and what are not. They want to decide what is true and what is not, what is good and what is not, what should be produced and what should not be produced. And they believe this is right, and they think, thinking is the wrong term, but they feel that the only way that they can do that is by taking control. But many people who go into politics to control others, I think, fool themselves into having this benevolent explanation. Some, the more vicious, want to control. There's no question they want to control. It's what motivates them, what guides them, and they just hate human beings. It's fear of reality and hatred. But some have this benevolent notion, and usually the guys who want to control, who hate and fear, are the ones who dominate, because the guys who have this benevolent view that they want to help society get crushed by the people who are not fooling anybody, who know exactly what they want and clearly are out to control. And they have no, usually the guys who are more soft are not gonna be willing to use violence and be very, or they will, but reluctantly. But the guys who really want to control you, they don't have any problem using violence or any means in order to do it. So therefore, they, in a world of force, in a world about power, in a world about control, they're the ones who are going to win. All right. Don't forget to like the show. It really helps with the algorithm, so please press that like button. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not a subscriber to the show. I'd really appreciate it. If you subscribe, you will get announcements for when the shows are on. If you press the bell, then you will get an announcement every time the show is live. Don't forget, if you want to support the show, you can support the show on youronbookshow.com/support. You can support the show on Patreon and on Subscribestar. Eager to get some of you new subscribers and new listeners to support the show as well. Value for value. But I understand completely. Some of you will want to listen to a few more shows before you decide that this is something that you value and that you want to support. The YouTube algorithm likes it when you press like. It elevates the show in the algorithm when you press like. So the more likes I get, the more likely it is that we get exposed to new people. The more likely it is that new people get to see the show and therefore get exposed to these ideas. If you value that, please press like. All right, let's get back to the Super Chat question. What your general opinion of Alex Jones? Wow. Do you see him as an honest actor? Also, what do you make of the Lincoln Project? They're currently supporting Democrats running for Congress. No, I don't think Alex Jones is an honest actor. I think Alex Jones is an entertainer, a con man, a conspiracy theory nutcase. Whether he believes it or not, I don't know. He probably doesn't believe most of the conspiracy theories. I think he's just figured out a way to make money off of people who do. Alex Jones is a con man on a grand scale. He is dishonest, and his conspiracy theories are proved time and time again to be false, or they are such that they cannot be disproven because there's always something that is above and beyond. I think it's an absolute, unequivocal waste of your time, waste of your effort, waste of your life to follow Alex Jones, to listen to him, to watch his shows. I do not recommend doing it. You are being conned, and he's very sophisticated and good at it. So often you think you're getting news when you're not. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. He is worse than the mainstream media. The mainstream media sometimes has a nugget of truth to it. Alex Jones has no nuggets of truth. He is peddling lies for a living, and for the most part, he knows it. Okay. By the way, I'm one of those who like how you conduct your show. Don't go changing, sitting down, etc. Wasn't here for your last show to say that. All right, thank you. Really appreciate that. And 20 Canadian dollars to say that. Thank you, Noel. Really appreciate that. All right, let's go through these quickly. We've got a bunch of them, so here we go. Eating an omelet, having coffee, and listening to you on life is great. And then I go depress you. Life is great while pursuing values. When is the $25 a month hangout? We did that last time. Wasn't that 2 days ago? So the next one will be a month from now. We do that once a month. So I don't know how you missed the email that was for 2 days ago. If you didn't get an email, please let Angela know. Please write me an email, and we'll fix that. We'll get you on the mailing list to make sure that you get the announcements for the $25 a month hangout. But the next one will be in December. It could help to think of Roark to get a shot of confidence heading into a business meeting. Yes. What is a healthy way of doing that versus second-handedness? Well, it's only second-handed if you're not really thinking about what you're doing. You're just following some formula, something. But if you understand what Roark means to you, if you understand what values he represents, then thinking of Roark is just a reminder of the values, a reminder of the integration of all those values, the benevolent universe, the idea that, if you act morally, if you act correct, good things happen, right? That the universe is not set against you. But that when you are virtuous, you are successful ultimately. Howard Roark serves as a reminder of that. It's not, I should do what Howard Roark does. Why? I don't know. I should do what Howard Roark would do because Howard Roark integrates, is a massive integration of the values I think are important to my life and that I know are important to my life because I proved to myself they're important for my life. And therefore, he represents that. And that's how I keep him in mind. Okay, Naveen says they're not getting the emails, new subscribers are not. Again, I will talk to Angela, make sure that for the December one you will get the emails, make sure you're on the mailing list. Also, sometimes these emails go to the junk folder. That's happened in the past, so please check junk folders as well and make sure that you're not missing them for some reason. But we will fix this. So I apologize that some of you did not get the $25 a month email this week, but we will fix it, and next month you will get it. All right, here's a $20 question. Do you think a significant amount of shareholders who own stock in a company will put their investment out upon a corporation announcing that they pledge themselves to stakeholder capitalism? I think the problem is that most shareholders are not attuned enough to these issues. And then there are shareholders like BlackRock and others who are now targeting companies, investing in companies that announce that they are focused on stakeholders. And the correcting mechanism for this, the way to correct this, is what used to be called hostile takeovers. So imagine a company adopts stakeholder theory, and as a consequence, profits drop, utilization of their assets drop, entrepreneurship drops. They have good people, but they're not utilizing them, and the stock price drops. In the old days, what would happen is people would raise money and go and buy the company cheap, cut the fat, refocus it on maximizing shareholder wealth, and make money. That's the beauty of hostile takeovers that happened in the 1980s and the early 1990s. But you see, governments have passed laws against that. In many states, they've made it almost impossible to do hostile takeovers. So there are fewer and fewer hostile takeovers today. And this goes back to the 1960s. I've done a whole course on this, where governments passed laws that make these things very difficult. It used to be the case that you could go into the market, buy up 50% of a company, walk into the CEO's office and say, "You're fired. I own 51% of the company. You're gone." Can't do that anymore. If you want to buy 50% of a company, you have to make a tender offer. You have to announce your intention to the world. You have to pay a premium in order to do it. So it's much more expensive to do it. And you have to announce it in advance. And the existing management can defend themselves, can put in all kind of things in place to protect themselves from you trying to take them over to improve shareholder wealth. So the legal system over the last few decades, since really the 1980s, has moved in a way, since the 60s, sorry, to suppress shareholder capitalism. So that correcting mechanisms are not there. So for example, Japan is dominated by the stakeholder ideas. So for example, they never fire anybody. And they're not focused on making money. They're not focused on efficiency. They're not focused on productivity. They're focused on taking care of everybody. So Japanese companies are often very inefficient, unproductive. And so when the Japanese economy crashed to a large extent because of these companies not being efficient and productive, they couldn't rebound. They couldn't recover from it. And Japan has been stuck in a funk with no real economic growth for decades now, 30 years, since the early 90s. Because there's no market mechanism to fix it. The market mechanism would be Michael Milken, high-yield bonds, hostile takeovers. Those are the kind of market mechanisms that correct failure. But when you let failure go uncorrected, when you get failure to compound upon itself, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger failure. And who's going to be blamed for those failures? Well, capitalism is. Not the regulations that prohibited hostile takeovers, not the... So I don't think shareholders have anywhere to go. Where do shareholders go once companies announce that they're stakeholder friendly? And so many shareholders, for example, the largest shareholder in the world, in the US, maybe not in the world, is CalPERS. CalPERS is the California, I think, Teachers Union or Public Union's pension plan. They want companies to be stakeholder friendly. And they invest in companies that are stakeholder friendly. They don't invest for profit. So there's too much money in the hands of irrational anti-capitalists for the markets to actually fix this. This is important. The only way to fix this is political. It's through politics. And the only way to fix politics is to change the culture. And the only way to change the culture is to change the philosophy, the ideas that people hold. All right, I know a lot of people are leaving because it's in an hour and a half already. Don't forget before you leave to please like the show. Just before you leave, just click on that button. It's easy. All right. Was my question on the stolen concept answered yesterday? Anybody remember? I don't know. I don't remember. David Kelly said, why do you guys like these insider questions? David Kelly said when you two met, you said you wanted TAS to disappear. Yes. We had a conference. John Allison was there. I was there. David Kelly was there. A couple of other David Kelly lieutenant were there. And I told them I wanted them to disappear. And I was willing basically to buy them out. John Allison and I were willing to buy them out. Is this consistent with you saying you wanted 25 objectivist organizations in the future? Yeah. I'm sure that some of the 25 organizations that I want in the future will be ones that I want to disappear. TAS does damage to objectivism. Has been doing damage to objectivism from day one. It is a fraudulent organization, established based on a fraud. And I told this to David. The fraud is that anything David Kelly comes up with is objectivism. No, it's not. Objectivism is what Ayn Rand said it was. David Kelly's stuff is his stuff. So yes, I wanted a fraudulent organization, taking credit for stuff, attributing it to Ayn Rand when they shouldn't be. I wanted them out of business. I wanted them to be gone. I wanted them to be dismantled. I still do. I mean, the ridiculous pretending you're Ayn Rand and putting on a Russian accent and then saying things that Ayn Rand would never, ever, ever in a darkest day say. That is not helping the objectivist cause. On the other hand, I realize that over time, there will be a lot of different organizations doing a lot of different things. Some of them I will want to disappear. Some of them, if I can, I will act to make disappear if I think they're doing harm to the cause. But I want 25 good objectivist organizations. But I'm not going to be able to control that. So there'll be 25 organizations, of which 15 I'll probably want shut down. As with David Kelly, he didn't agree with me. So they didn't shut down. All right, this is very narrow to an audience and many people who are new. It's not very useful. All right. I would lose my mind having to put up with modern intellectuals and their followers with all their evasions and fallacies. Don't know how you do it. Thank you for defending existence. My pleasure. I actually enjoy it. It's a challenge. But yes, I wish I didn't have to do the work. I wish it was done. Frank, thank you. That is very generous. Really appreciate it. All right. Gene says, thank you for scheduling the shows a few days in advance on YouTube. This makes it easier to plan my free time to listen live. Yeah, I will try to do that more. I've done it for the next few shows. There will be a show on Monday of this week. But I don't know what the theme is going to be yet, and I don't know that. So there will be, I can tell you, there'll be a show tomorrow, there'll be a show Monday. There's a show Wednesday, which will be part 2 of this series on the Great Reset, which will focus on inequality. There'll be a show Saturday with Alex Epstein, and there'll be a show Sunday, I'm not sure what. And this Sunday, the show will be on integrity. Maybe next Sunday, we'll see. Either Sunday or Monday of the following week will be Pride. Pride is coming up soon. Why do proponents still use the term capitalism? I've talked about that, so I've answered that question. Human rights, another package deal? I think so. Yeah, in the way they use it, it's a package deal. Human rights are really individual rights plus all these other things that are anti-individual rights, that contradict individual rights. You know, you have a right to a job and a right to health care, and animals have rights, and like the UN Statement of Human Rights or the European Statement of Human Rights, these are mishmashes of some legitimate things and a lot of illegitimate things, and the illegitimate things annihilate, zero out the legitimate things. So basically it is a destructive anti-concept. Is there place for more public debate around the direction of the movement? Which movement? I.e. U.S. versus international, whether the focus, outreach on left and right. Yeah, absolutely. We can have lots of debates about the direction of the objectivist movement. I'm also open to honest criticism. I mean, have I made mistakes in my role as CEO and chairman of the board of the Ayn Rand Institute? Absolutely. Is it possible there are ideas we haven't tried yet that are better than mine? Absolutely. Should we be focused on the U.S. versus international? That is an interesting debate. I have a strong opinion about that, but it's an interesting debate to have. Should we focus the outreach on left versus right? Interesting debate. I don't know that there's a definitive answer to that. I have forever outreach to both. And I have a lot of experience outreach to left and right. And I don't, I'll just say this. I don't think anybody out there has more experience than me in outreach to left and right and what is successful and what is not. Now, again, maybe I'm wrong. So, absolutely, there's lots of place for public debate about these things, public in terms of inside the movement. And that debate is encouraged. But it needs to be honest. It needs to be done in a way that facilitates knowledge and progress and advancement rather than settling scores and demonizing. So, yeah, I mean, I am all for challenging what the Institute is doing, what the movement is doing, what I'm doing. I mean, I'm challenged all the time by people saying, I'm wrong about what I do. I disagree with them, so I get to do what I want to do, right? But in terms of the Institute, donors should have a voice, should feel free to criticize and feel free to let management of the Institute, let them know if they think they disagree. And there might be conversation. At the end of the conversation, there might be an agreement to disagree. That's also possible. But yes, you're never at the end of public debate because there is no one way to do this. There are no philosopher kings in objectivism, particularly when it comes to, I mean, there are no philosopher kings in objectivism, but when it comes to how to change the world, you know, we've got what Ayn Rand said about it, which I think is really, really important to use. And that's what we try to do, but it's also experience and trying different things and thinking about what would have an impact in the world in which we live and to what extent to use technology and all these things. All of that is important. Rez, I did answer the question yesterday, so I'm not going to answer it now. It's on yesterday's show. I definitely answered it yesterday. Okay, your statements are a serious bummer. Yeah, I guess they are. You're on, but evasion must be countenanced. Evasion is, after all, unlike the love of money, the root of all evil. Absolutely. So I appreciate the fact that what I do is not prevent evasion. What I do is provide you with knowledge about the evasions of others. Is there any value in efforts to conflate self-avowed eco-fascists, such as Christchurch shooter, with the political eco-fascist ideology, are smear campaigns that obfuscate bad concepts moral? Is there any value in efforts to conflate self-avowed eco-fascists? I mean, the problem with the Christchurch shooter is he wasn't just an eco-fascist. He was also, and what motivated the particular shootings in Christchurch was this hater of Islam and hater of just hater. So he had a particular spin on eco-fascism. And I don't think, I mean, that's worth pointing out. But lumping him in with people who want Muslims to immigrate everywhere in Europe and are also eco-fascists is unhelpful. So you want to be able to show the similarities, but you also want to show the differences and want to show that they're both evil. So I think of the Christchurch shooter as a eco-fascist of the right, and the Greta Thunbergs of the world as eco-fascists of the left. And I think it's useful to have a distinction between the left and the right, as long as you recognize that they're both forms of statism today, and that we are not of the right, right? Is there any value in efforts to conflate? Oh, yeah, I just read this. Are smear campaigns that obfuscate bad concepts moral? I'm not sure what you mean by that. But generally, I'm not for smear campaigns, so I think smear campaigns generally are not moral. I think the right approach is always to deal with the facts and to deal with them rationally and to present the best rational case for things. So I'm not big on obfuscation and of smear campaigns. I don't think they're the right way to deal with the world. Would I need permission to recite a few minutes of Howard Rourke's speech on a local radio show that I recite famous speeches on? If it's a few minutes, probably not. But if you want, the best way to get that is to just get permission by emailing, the Leonard Peikoff, emailing the Ayn Rand Estate, or emailing the Ayn Rand Institute. I don't have permission. I don't have the authority to say yes, it's okay, no, it's not. So the best thing would be to email them, and hopefully you can get a quick response. Okay, we're done. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here on your Saturday. Tomorrow, same time, we will be talking about integrity. I hope you all join us. I think it'll be an interesting conversation. And it'll be the one before last in discussing the application of the objectivist ethics. Thank you for those of you who are watching on Facebook. It's great to have you back. I know I was streaming before on the Facebook and the On Book Show event, Facebook page and on my personal page, but now we have my fan page, or whatever it's called, back on, so it's nice to have you guys on as well. So that's great. All right. See you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody. I'm going to go get some dinner. Bye.